Tehran on fire after missile strike. U.S. warships race to Gulf. Markets plunge as oil prices soar. These headlines, lit up screens around the world. Anchors spoke with trembling voices. War in the Middle East seemed, honestly, just moments away. Crowds gathered in capitals from London to Islamabad, glued to their phones. The sense of fear was real, immediate. Yet beyond the spotlight, a second story was quietly taking shape. As bombs fell on Iranian soil, something else was happening far from the cameras. In the South China Sea, ships moved in silence. Dredgers churned sand, day and night, on a remote reef. There was no breaking news, no live coverage. For most people, the story did not exist. And that was by design. But what if the real global crisis was not where the cameras pointed? What if, while we watched one war unfold, another battle was being prepared, one for control of the world's busiest sea lanes? The answer lay hidden in satellite photos and whispered warnings from diplomats. This is the story of how, while the world watched Iran, China changed the map of Asia. Forever. The world is rarely calm, but seldom does it face two major crises at once. In the West, a shooting war threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is the lifeline for much of the world's oil. In the East, a quieter but equally dangerous struggle played out in the South China Sea. Here, China quietly built a new island fort. Most people can only focus on one breaking story at a time. Journalists rushed to Tehran and Dubai. Politicians held emergency meetings about oil and refugees. But, out in the Pacific, Chinese engineers worked non-stop, watched only by a few worried neighbors. Their project was astonishing, an artificial island the size of 1,100 football fields. Two different crises, but both were about power and resources. Iran threatened to choke off oil supplies. China aimed to control sea lanes and islands. Each move risked war, but in very different ways, and each would affect billions of lives. For ordinary people, the connection was invisible. But leaders in Asia saw both storms coming, and knew that the future would be decided by what happened in both places. Every major news outlet turned its cameras toward Iran. The world watched as missiles flew and oil tankers burned. Social media was flooded with images of smoke, protests, and panic buying at gas stations. Governments scrambled to reassure their citizens, but the fear was everywhere. Oil prices spiked within hours. Airlines rerouted flights. The world held its breath. In those tense days, almost no one noticed what was happening 4,000 miles to the east. China's Navy and Air Force quietly moved into the South China Sea. Their ships formed a protective ring around Antelope Reef. Within that ring, cranes and bulldozers went to work. They poured concrete foundations, raised radar towers, and built airstrips. It was the largest island-building project China had ever attempted. Why did no one report on this? The answer is simple. War sells. Iran's crisis was loud, explosive, and easy to understand. China's island building was slow, technical, and far from home. But history often turns on what we fail to see. As the world stared at Iran, China changed the facts on the ground. This was not just a distraction, it was a calculated move. While everyone else was looking west, China grabbed a new piece of the east. The Strait of Hormuz is only 21 miles wide at its narrowest, yet every day over 20 million barrels of oil pass through it. That is 1/5 of the world's oil supply. If Iran closes the strait, oil tankers cannot reach Asia, Europe, or Africa. It is the most important oil route on the planet. A single decision, to mine the waters, block a tanker, or fire a missile, could bring the world's economy to its knees. That is why every major power keeps warships nearby. But warships cannot pump oil, or keep global trade moving. In a crisis, the world holds its breath every time a ship leaves the Gulf. When the strait is threatened, oil prices spike overnight. Stock markets tumble. Governments order strategic oil reserves to be released, but that only buys time. For countries like Japan, South Korea, and China, the countdown to energy shock starts the moment the strait closes. It is a knife-edge moment. The whole world feels it. But, while everyone's attention is fixed on Hormuz, something even bigger is happening elsewhere. Asia is, honestly, the world's biggest oil buyer. Japan imports 90% of its oil, mostly from the Middle East. South Korea relies on imports for 85% of its needs. China, which is the world's top energy user, gets nearly half its imported oil from the Persian Gulf. Even India depends on the Strait of Hormuz for 60% of its crude. The numbers are, well, staggering. Every single day, over 70% of Asia's oil flows through Hormuz. That means any crisis there hits Asian economies the hardest. Refineries in Singapore, Tokyo, and Shanghai grind to a halt if tankers stop arriving. Factories slow down. Power plants face blackouts. Daily life, from cooking to commuting, gets harder and more expensive. For poorer countries like Pakistan and the Philippines, the pain comes even faster. Their foreign reserves can only buy a few weeks' worth of oil at sky-high prices. Inflation soars. People queue for fuel. Governments face public anger and chaos in the streets. This is exactly why every Asian leader watches Hormuz with fear. One wrong move could mean economic disaster, not just for one country, but for the whole region. Japan's factories, really depend on cheap, steady oil. When prices jump, so do the costs of cars, electronics, and food. South Korea's shipping giants burn fuel by the ton. A crisis means higher prices for everything from smartphones to steel. In India, where millions still struggle with poverty, higher oil prices mean less money for schools and hospitals. Pakistan, already facing a dollar shortage, watches its energy bills double overnight. Power cuts spread, schools close, and businesses fail. The Philippines, a nation of islands, sees ferry services suspended and fishermen grounded. Even Egypt, far from Asia, suffers as canal traffic slows and tourism falls. Each country feels the shock in its own way. Rich or poor, big or small, honestly, no one is spared. The pain spreads faster than news of the original crisis, and as leaders struggle to respond, their eyes turn east, to see what China is doing in the South China Sea. The message is clear: global crises are connected. Decisions made in Tehran or Beijing have ripple effects in every home, shop, and school across Asia. While the world was distracted, China built something extraordinary. At Antelope Reef, dredgers and cranes worked around the clock, day and night. In just 5 months they created an island over 800 acres in size, bigger than 1,100 football fields. Satellite images revealed runways, radar domes, missile bunkers, and deep-water docks for warships. This was not just a sandbar, it was a fortress. Analysts say it can host fighter jets, anti-ship missiles, and hundreds of troops. Its location is perfect, right in the middle of the South China Sea's busiest shipping lanes. From here, China can watch, threaten, or even block commercial ships. No country has ever built an island this fast, or this big, in such a contested sea. The message to Asia was clear: China is here to stay, and it is willing to change the geography to prove it. For the fishermen and sailors who once crossed these waters freely, everything changed overnight. What was once open ocean is now a military base, bristling with radar and guns. China's timing was perfect. While the United States and its allies mobilized for war in the Gulf, Chinese ships and engineers swarmed Antelope Reef. They set up exclusion zones and warned off foreign vessels. The world was just too busy to notice. By the time journalists caught up, the island was finished. This is not the first time a crisis in one part of the world has provided cover for action elsewhere. But honestly, rarely has it been so obvious and so successful. China's leaders knew that global attention would be fixed on Iran. They gambled that no one would challenge their move in the South China Sea, and they were right. United States naval patrols in the area dropped by half as the Pentagon focused on the Middle East. Asian neighbors like Vietnam and the Philippines could only protest. No one was ready to risk open conflict, not with the world already on edge. By the time the world looked east, it was too late. China had already changed the facts on the water. The new island was there to stay. The Philippines responded first and loudest. Manila renamed dozens of islands and reefs, including Antelope Reef, using Filipino names to assert sovereignty. The government filed sharp protests with Beijing and reached out to allies. The United States and Philippines launched their biggest joint military exercises in years, including simulated island defenses and amphibious landings. Japanese troops arrived to show support, a historic first. Vietnam, caught between fear and pragmatism, quietly strengthened its own islands and sent diplomats to Beijing. Hanoi avoided open confrontation but made clear it would not back down. Other ASEAN countries watched anxiously, weighing their own responses. China dismissed the protests and doubled down on its claim. State media showed off the island's new facilities and praised the peaceful development of the region. But honestly, few in Asia believed the words. The world's focus was still on Iran, but in Asia, the sense of crisis was just beginning. The region braced for a new, uncertain era. Why does all this matter? Because the world's future now hangs on the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. Whoever controls the South China Sea holds the key to Asia's trade, energy, and security. China's new island is more than concrete and steel. It is a symbol of ambition and a warning to its neighbors. Ordinary people may not follow news from faraway reefs, but they feel the effects at home. Higher prices, fewer jobs, and growing fears of war all stem from these distant struggles. As crises multiply, the lessons are clear. Never look away from what matters. Always expect the unexpected. The world watched Iran, but missed the bigger story in Asia. Now, with a new island fortress on the map, the future of the region, and perhaps the world, has changed forever.